Hello, and welcome to Entertainment Talk. I am Nick Weiser, your host, and this is my guest, Sir Talks a Lot.
Why, hello there. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It feels like a true honor to be a host on your channel.
Well, I welcome you to it. So, the question is, why remakes, reboots, and spin-offs? And what exactly do they do for the entertainment industry?
Oh, okay. This is a loaded question. So I'm going to start off with remakes.
Okay.
Remakes have created, in my opinion, a form of laziness for Hollywood. It says, we're not going to take chances on fresh ideas. And this is something that I've iterated to many people before, whether it's in person or via stream. I said that if The Matrix never came out in 1999, it would have never made the storyboard past the storyboards in 2021 because they were seen as, oh, that's a new idea, that's too risky. Whereas nowadays they see it as, oh, well, we got to go off what has an established audience because they don't want to give a fresh new idea. And it also hurts the current generation. The current generation doesn't see it. But that's also because we come from a generation where we have something to call our own. Whereas,
right, we actually grew up with the original versions of it.
Yes, we go through the original version, and then you do get Zers who eventually come around, whose tastes do expand, and they're like, "Oh, well, this is not the real version, or this is the secondary." You're saying that all you're good to have is the sloppy seconds. You don't have something to call your own, and I feel like every generation should have that. I mean, whether we like a set of movies from a particular era, a particular music era, like even back then with music, a lot of our parents, grandparents, they came from like the Elvis era. They could say, at least regardless of how we feel about Presley, that era was their own. We can say we came from an era of like the Tupacs or the Korns or Metallicas, an era to call our own. But in movies nowadays, it's like, yeah, cool. We had some cool, successful franchises with like Marvel and such, but that's obviously a questionable direction where that goes further. But it's just, what do we have that's original? What gives them their own unique identity? They don't have an identity. It's just franchises, reboots, sequels, reboots.
Well, would you say that this is evidence of creative bankruptcy on the part of Hollywood and the writers that they're hiring?
Hard to say, because I would like to see what these writers are writing when they're not having to write something that's already been done before 800,000 times. Here's the thing, and this is something I've iterated in comic books. There are many writers in comic books, per se, the big two, Marvel and DC, where they will write something for the big two, and I'm not really wild about it, but their creator-owned indie work is a lot better. And it kind of gets you that whole, like, this is the same guy writing this. I hate it when he tackled this character, but why is his creator book drastically better? So it kind of puts you in a question: is he just not good with like what we already know? This is where expectations are also channeled differently. You go into something with the era of mystery, whereas when you come off a franchise, you're passing the mantle down from one writer to the next.
Right.
So there's many conflicts. It's hard to tell. I would have to see how a writer would write, like, as far as their own thing. But I also am not, I'm totally not like lacking of self-awareness. There are some writers, especially in like Discovery and stuff like that. Star Trek, right? Star Trek, yeah. And they definitely are writing only to be an activist. They're not trying to be a writer. And they are now like so open out and the honest about what they're trying to push. Like at times they're kind of like deflecting, but it was one of those, like, give enough time, they're eventually slowly admit what they're doing. And now it's as clear as day now.
Yep. Well, that raises another question for me, which would be, do you think that too much of the controlling interest in creating entertainment lies in the hands of the company instead of the creator?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy my fair share of Marvel movies. There's some ones I'm not really wild about, but even the ones I do enjoy, there is no doubt that there is a like set thing going on that basically when you sign to be a director or a writer, you're basically to large degrees that by a title and sometimes nothing more. I mean, look no further than what happened with Edgar Wright and Ant-Man. And in Marvel's defense, I'll admit they were in the right in the situation. Edgar Wright did know what he was signing up for in advance because he wanted it to be a standalone, self-contained story, which is nothing wrong with that. They both had good ideas. It's just what they both wanted was dramatically different. But he did know going to advance what they wanted, but he also kept pushing it back. So we already know Edgar Wright is a creative, but it just kind of makes you wonder how talented are these directors truly? Like when we let them run loose.
Well, we've seen some of how creative the directors are with the franchises and stuff, given Jar Jar Abrams, the amount of control that they gave to Kathleen Kennedy over the director in how they should have shot the movie. Because if someone else would have controlled the original trilogy instead of George Lucas being the director and everything else with it, it would have come out shit. It would have been a Stephen King movie. And those are always bad because the creator doesn't have any creative control over it. And the director actually, do you think that the directors these days know their source material well enough to be doing these franchises?
If they
Star Wars
did,
aside.
If they did, it barely shows. Now, here's the thing. I don't feel like you have to know the material. I should at least feel you should at least know basics, especially if you're continuing off something that's continuing, because I don't really think Jon Favreau grew up reading an Iron Man comic. Now, if he did, at least read into material, cool. But I have a thing. He never said anything. I looked at all the his press talks, interviews leading up to that first Iron Man movie, and he didn't talk about how he's a big fan growing up, and that's fine. They don't have to be, but it feels like he did enough research to say, okay, this is what the character is. At least go off of those basics, the basics. So yeah, you don't have to know everything top to bottom, but core ingredients are a must, in my opinion.
I agree. That's a very good point. So with modern spin-offs of old shows, do you think that there's too much of a generational gap to keep the core elements of our old shows alive, say Star Trek, my personal favorite, Stargate, things like that? Do you think might have been too much of a gap between the original and the spin-offs that we have nowadays, like Picard, to be able to keep the amount of source material in it to make it a good spin-off?
I do feel like timing does play a factor because, you want to keep the hype train going. That's one thing. The hype train, in my opinion, is a big thing, at least as far as marketing is concerned.
Yeah.
And you have that. And also, back then, there was a lot less competition. Nowadays, everyone wants everything to be in franchise. Like, we came from a world where you would get like a one and done movie like, I don't know, Commando. Nowadays, if Commando came out somehow and succeeded, they would be talking about how this is going to have 5 sequels coming up. That is a huge problem when everyone wants to have that. No one wants to be in and out anymore. So that alone, I feel like, hurts that, is that time away from it.
Absolutely. And given the time to die that it needs to have, what are your thoughts on franchises that run for so long that it's just droll? Like, for me, that would be Fast and Furious, because they already have scripts for 11 and 12. They just released 9 and they're filming 10. I think, it's like Land Before Time all over again with explosions and cars, in my personal opinion.
No, I get what you're saying. No, that is a tricky one because, like, I don't mind long-running franchises if the story maintains, but the last Fast and the Furious movie I watched was the 5th one. I did think the 4th one was all right. It is the first one where I actually felt more story oriented, whereas the other movies, the characters just kind of existed to show off what their sweet rides were.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is definitely, I guess you could say there's an overabundance of it. We should learn to have a beginning, middle, and an end. Not everything needs to have 800 sequels. Like, I will give, once again, I'm going to sound like the villain here, but I will give Marvel that original credit because they were the one to come up with the idea, or I wouldn't say start first, but they're the ones who got the ground running on it first. And they had it, and they actually did have a plan, to be fair. Whether you feel like they stuck the landing or not is neither here nor there. But it was clear from the get-go they were trying to do something else. Now all you got, Universal wanted to do the monster thing, and Universal also again with the Fast and Furious, because if you think about it, they were just looking at it as like a few movies way back when. But then the Marvel thing happened. They're like, okay, we gotta keep this the son of a bitch going. So we gotta ride this thing down. And now, of course, Warner Bros. Want like, hey, we got comic books. We gotta do the same thing. Even Sony at one point was like, oh, we should do like a Jump Street Men in Black thing. It's just like, who asked for that?
Right.
I love the first Men in Black, but nobody asked for that. And it's because all these studios, the problem is, and this is a historical problem in Hollywood, anytime someone gets something going and is like, I guess you could say the first to popularize it or to start it, all the other studios kind of look at it like, okay, we have to do that. We have to do that. It's kind of like also like the what I call the Dark Knight effect. When the Dark Knight hit in 2008, like I enjoyed the movie, but I am also well aware that one of the backfiring effects of it is all studios like, oh my god, every need to be like this, and not in terms of like quality, but in terms of like the tonality. They apply this idea was someone hit this peak of success, and now they think it applies to a one size fits all option. And I feel like what appealed with the Dark Knight, like it was dark, sure, but it wasn't dark to a point where you couldn't take it seriously anymore. Like there was, in my opinion, a tonal balance, and that's a problem. Like someone sees success, like we have to duplicate that formula, and in Hollywood it never works. I mean, I've never seen a generation, and it's funny because with the remakes, we continue seeing more of them fail, and a few get some great degrees of success, particularly Disney. But yet, more than fail, it's just like, who is seeing these? And no one's asking for them. Like, no one is asking for them.
Right. So, on the remake note, do you think there have been any good live action remakes of any of the old Disney movies? Because I haven't actually brought myself to watch any of them yet.
Okay. I've watched 3 of them.
Okay.
I watched Jungle Book. I did give that a pass, and it just, maybe it's because it was the first one that was brought into that format that I was like okay with it. I was entertained. You know, I had a good cast: Scarlett Johansson, Ben Kingsley. What's that guy? Oh, Bill Murray. Old school name, big names, and you're seeing, okay, it's a good cast. But then when that movie succeeded, and it was entertaining, now they're like, oh, hey, look, we can do that with all of our old movies. So even Disney, like, they saw their own success and try to duplicate that as well. So even the studio that got an innovative idea going, they wanted to duplicate that. And that is crazy. I wouldn't care as much if it was like once in a while. And I mean once in a while, I mean like half a decade to a decade. And I've heard all these terrible excuses in Hollywood, like 5 years is a long time in Hollywood. So it's like, dude, you're so disconnected from the world. If you're considering 5 years a long time in Hollywood, you're not a dog. This isn't dog years, man. You're a human being.
Okay, if 5 years is a long time in Hollywood, then why are all of my favorite actors been around for 50? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, that's not a long time.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're good, you're good.
Time.
People want to see your stuff and they want to consume your products. And that's kind of a point that I've been trying to make on these shows, is if you make something good, people will actually get it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And can I bounce off when you mentioned actors being of old age? Because when the Star Wars sequel trilogy was coming out, there's some people like, oh, but like, aren't Luke and Han and Leia old? It's just like, and I'm like, my counter argument was like, did you forget that when the first Star Wars movie ever released theatrically, that Obi-Wan was already old, and most of us loved him anyways? Do we forget about Gandalf with Ian McKellen? Like, it's once again, of course, it doesn't help with crowded competition and short-term memory, but we forget a lot of things, and I try to like not forget those things because I want to be counterproductive from that. But we see everyone just forget something that happened 5 minutes ago, not literally, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking, they forget.
With the flood of everything that happens in modern society, people often forget about very big things, very little things. They forget about things that have commonly occurred, especially in Hollywood. We're very forgetful and forgiving for Hollywood celebrities. And we, in my opinion, give them too much slack. But that's a little off topic.
The thing is, you're right. We do. I feel like, if anything, it's very relevant because we cut them too much slack. It gives them the leeway to continue to do this. So I feel like what you say is very relevant. I mean, I can see why you say you feel like it's off topic, but for me, that adds on to us because it's one of those things where you give them an inch and they take a mile, and that is what is become of the remakes and the sequels and the spin-offs. Like, I actually am not as much opposed to spin-offs and sequels, but remakes drives me nuts. Like, there's so many
So,
movies that are perfect the way they are.
all right. So, what was your least favorite remake that you've seen so far?
Man, that feels like a trick question because I have a very strong resentment towards them. I mean, almost towards all of them. I won't
Okay,
say every
so
single one of them, but oh man, how do you're gonna
easier
have to toss me
question
a few
then.
bones?
Yeah,
Yeah.
easier question then. What was a remake you didn't mind? That
The
should be a
Jungle Book
shorter list.
one.
The
Jungle
Jungle
Book
Book one.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
the Jungle Book one.
Were there any older movie remakes that you liked, maybe that other people really didn't like? Say the new Star Trek with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think those were okay for a remake, given the time frame difference with how they changed the timeline and everything?
I didn't really hate them, but I didn't really like them either. If
Okay.
anything, when I watched that first movie in 2009, I don't remember what happened when it finished. It was just like,
Oh,
what
okay.
happened? I knew Carl Urban, I think, was in it, and Chris Pine, but that's about all I remember to the
So you
best of my
so
ability.
so would it be fair to say that the Star Trek reboots, in your opinion, were uh, underwhelming? Like,
Oh, very
like
underwhelming.
they just didn't
Very.
deliver the same excitement for you that the originals did, or that Next Generation, or whatever your favorite one happens to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I now here's the thing. Now I'm gonna be very as per usual. I try to be as honest as I can be. As
Of
far as
course.
Star Trek goes, I'm a bit of a normie. I
Okay.
do have lots of extended family that are big into Star Trek, so I know the once again I know some basics. I know ideas. I know the comedy aspect of it. They can have every now and again the fact they actually always had progressive elements that modern day progressives are trying to take credit for things that already happened way
Right.
back when. So I am well aware of those things. And even then, I'm just like, this doesn't feel enjoyable like Star Trek. It felt so dull and bland. And one of my biggest thing is having good, likable characters that one day you're just kind of driving around the car and all of a sudden before you know it, you're trying to like emulate. Like when we were all kids in the early to mid '90s, we were all trying to emulate like we were Wolverine having claws on our hands. I mean, how
See,
could we not?
I
And
was
we don't
still
get
the
that with
kid.
Star Trek.
I was still the kid emulating William Shatner as Kirk.
And that's fine. You were still impersonating someone.
It was
That's
great.
fine. You were impersonating someone
I
because you
can't
felt
find my socks.
you found something to like in that character. You said, okay, before you know it, you were doing your own little
Yeah.
impersonations. We don't have a whole lot of that anymore. Everyone just feels like they're so overly safe and bland. It's just like there's no character relation, which is very ironic considering that they're talking about representation. And it's just like, well, Hollywood's been diverse for 30, 40 years if you think about it. Like when the recent trailer came out for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I can't the actor's name, I don't know if it's like Simu or Simu Lu, whatever his name is. He's playing Shang-Chi. He did a post on his Instagram how he's talking about how like this is like the first big real Asian representation, and it
Really?
blew my mind that this guy blatantly lied.
Yeah.
Now, if he had said something along the lines of like I don't know high budget, maybe I can concede. But do we forget about Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Bruce
Right.
Lee's son Brandon Lee, Donnie Yen? Like I'm like, where did
Okay.
this guy come from? And the worst
Yeah.
part is people are rolling with it. They're pretending his argument, or they're
I
just
think.
that ill informed, and they're going with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty sure every person that you just named would have an issue with what this guy just said.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
rightfully so.
yeah, but so back to the topic of remakes and stuff.
Yes.
Did you ever watch Stargate? I'm a nerd on the Stargate thing.
I was always interested, and unfortunately, time, like many other things considered, happened. I never got around to it. That was a show I was always interested. I saw it in comic books in the early mid '90s. My oh, it looks cool. Kind of like when I saw ads for Babylon 5. Like,
Yeah,
oh, that looks really cool. I should watch that someday. And I'm hoping nowadays, with the less interest in modern entertainment, I can make that moment to say, hey, what did I not see 10, 20 years ago that I've been holding off on? I feel like nowadays, if anything, this is a golden age
Do you?
to catch up on those things because I have
Yes,
been doing that with
absolutely.
movies. I have been doing that with movies lately. So hopefully shows I'll get my crack at shows, but I have absolutely
Heck
been doing
yeah.
that with movies.
Well, as you may be aware, Amazon just bought MGM, so they
Yes.
now have Bond. They have over 4,000 titles from MGM now,
Mm-hmm.
controlling interest, which includes my favorite Stargate. But it will be on, if it's not already, it will be on Prime if you have a Prime account or you have
Oh
somebody
yeah, I'm
else's.
aware.
So, okay. Definitely watch SG1. Atlantis is kind of worth your time if you like SG1.
Mm-hmm.
Universe is honestly, you could throw that shit in the garbage and I would be totally happy because they tried to modernize it, but they fucked it up. And then they just left it hanging that pretty much in the middle of a season where it's all like everyone went into cryo.
That's
Have a great
another
day.
thing that you remind when you say the word modernize, because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like when you create a certain product of its own time, I feel like those are core ingredients of that product. Because when they say it's a retelling or reimagining, it just tells me that they're changing what you love and know that what made it great and creating it in their own image. So it's just like when I see those words, that becomes a huge red flag for me. I was that way
Absolutely.
when I heard about Zack Snyder doing Superman. I thought, oh no, they're gonna make Superman act like Batman but with superpowers. And lo and behold, I was absolutely right. I hate when I'm right about these
I
things.
still have not seen that yet. I've had HBO Max for a long time. I still haven't seen that shit
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's giving me mixed reports, and I'm like, okay, I need to find 4 hours to sit down and watch this movie because that's my biggest hangup right
I
now. Is
think
it's
it's only
4 hours.
2 hours. Man of Steel is only 2 hours.
No, I mean the Zack Snyder cut. I haven't
Oh,
watched the
Zack
Snyder
Snyder
cut
cut.
yet because it's
Mm-hmm.
4 hours long, and I haven't found that kind of time. You know.
Yeah, some people have been watching in spades. Some people have been doing because there is. I will say, I mean, this one of the very few things Zack Snyder did right for that movie. I did see it. He did break up into chapters, so that gives you like a jumping in and off point, so you can watch like 30, 40 minutes. I think it's like 6 chapters out of the 4 hours. I think yeah, 6 chapters, if not 7 at most. So
Okay.
it does give you a easy in and easy out if that gives you
All
any
right.
incentive to go by that way. I'm
Yep.
surprised no one told you that any
No,
sooner.
nobody's told me anything like that. And honestly, I've been trying to stay away from the spoiler reviews
Mhm.
because I hate that. I hate people giving
Yeah.
stuff away in spoilers,
Mhm.
all that stuff.
Especially nowadays, and this is something I blame Access Media for because nowadays you had to really like try hard to find spoilers, but nowadays it feels like the spoilers are out to get me the way a vegan goes out of the way to say to me that they're vegan by starting a conversation. It's just like,
That's true.
What? I wasn't looking for you. I was just
Yep.
trying to find a story about the movie. But nowadays they write it in the headline. They like
Hmm.
those spoilers are out to hunt for you, and especially nowadays with like the Twitters of the world,
Yeah.
they set things to trending. And sometimes when they say what's trending, sometimes it could be a name or reveal. I've seen this happen too. Luckily, I think one time with the Mandalorian, I had already watched the episodes. So I wasn't affected, but I saw that the name Ahsoka Tano was trending. I'm like, it's a good thing I watched that episode because had I not, people were like, "What's Ahsoka Tano trending for at 2 a.m. when the episode's freaking premiering?" I feel
Yeah.
like, in my opinion, that's a
Well,
very direct spoiler.
yeah, I remember when it started trending on Twitter for that actually, and
Mm-hmm.
that was like right before I got off Twitter. But I remember when it started like trending, and I'm like, I haven't heard any of the fandom guys talk about this yet. This is kind of weird. And then like the next day or so, I started seeing the guys talk about Ahsoka Tano actually being in it and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, because I mean, certain shows, because I don't have Disney Plus, I don't mind spoilers on, but uh, it it's I don't quite understand the Mandalorian storyline. I know I need to watch
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning to do so, but from what I've seen and stuff, it seems like they did a lot of goulashing, where they pulled a lot of shit from a lot of different places and
Oh
just threw it into a
yeah.
show.
I mean, they definitely pulled a lot of stuff in. I mean, you can at least tell there are people who actually were trying to do something good, whether you liked it or not, is
Yeah.
obviously that's a whole interesting subject for debate for many
Right.
eons. But you can at least tell like Jon Favreau is a genuine Star Wars fan. He actually does care about story first. I mean, it sounds like you don't care about spoilers, so I'll give you one right now just to show you like how they were. This is something that happened in the season 2 finale. There's a scene where 3 women came in, one of them being Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune,
Right.
and 2 of them were what's that? Ming-Na Wen's Fennec Shan and Katie Sackhoff's Bo-Katan. They
Okay.
arrived at a ship with Mando, and they were going out kicking ass and taking names. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was like the women were out there kicking ass and annihilating the shit out of the Dark Troopers. But Katie Sackhoff mentioned, like in the interview, she said what made that scene great is they just went in there and did their job and got to the next mission. They didn't go there and talk about how they were women and girl power. They just did what they needed to do and get to the next spot. They didn't stop to talk about girl power. And I do agree with
Yeah.
Sackhoff on that. She's got a great point. And I feel like if
Absolutely.
more women or even just anyone in general did that, we would not feel like we're trying to be taught a lesson or be lectured or be
Yep.
shamed or et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and it's been a point that I've made several times that entertainers need to focus on entertaining and leave the political and social commentary, private, because the amount of influence that they have, just because of their visibility to the public, let's say, it far outweighs their actual expert status on the things that they're talking about 99% of the time.
Yes.
And so if more entertainers would recognize that they're there to entertain and they would just show up and do their job and not worry about the rest of the shit, they wouldn't be worried, so fearful for their jobs that they're getting in bed with these corporations the way they are. That's my personal opinion anyway. Just saying.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's very interesting. Here's the thing, like, I mean, and that's a very tricky line because there is freedom of speech, but at the same time, I don't know if it's you can speak, but it's more of a if you want to speak, go ahead, but you better consider the consequences if you do, because you might push a whole demographic away. And saddest part is nowadays it doesn't seem like they care about push that demographic. They're trying to continue to chase an audience that doesn't really want to spend money to get their product. We've seen it with Marvel. We've seen it with DC, Doctor Who, Star Wars, Star Trek. They're saying, we're going to get these ratings. We're going to get this ticket money. We're going to get this box office, you name it. And when they do, these effects backfire. And those same people that they cast out and shame, they'll blame them for why the product doesn't succeed. It doesn't make any sense, right? Birds of Prey, look no further. Ewan McGregor was talking about how this movie is going to be a very feminist movie. He said word for word, feminist movie.
And then
that
the movie killed a lot of interest in it.
Yes, it did. And I watched it too. Like, I didn't love it, but it did not feel like a giant lecture. There are some few, I guess you could say, subtle moments of it, but it didn't feel like I've seen movies that were full on woke, like full on. And this felt like the much lesser of two evils. But like I was expecting full on, kind of like what the whole I'm vegan jumping at you, like that was it. But no, it was. I'm kind of watching this. I'm like, okay, I don't really feel like I'm being lectured. There's a few annoyances, but nothing where I'm just like, wow, this thing up its stupid ass. It's just like it was just not great. It was just eh. But they still, of course, much like the Charlie's Angels, much like the Terminator Dark Fate, they lead with these things and they don't learn from it. And even though these things continue to lose money, I keep telling people, I don't think they care about losing the money. They care about getting the message. To me, that's what I think they care about more, is as long as they get that message that they're trying to indoctrinate people with. I feel like that's what they care about more. It kind of confuses me when YouTubers say, oh, why do they care? Why don't they want to make money? I'm like, I've had to stress, no, they don't want to make money, guys. They don't. If they were making money, they would be trying to fix the situation. But nowadays we're in a world where when you fail at something, you fail upwards. You move on the trajectory and say, okay, I bombed this product. now I can move on to the next thing to Bob. And J.J. Abrams is the finest proof of that. Star Trek, Star Wars, and now whatever he's got going on with Warner Brothers and DC. He's a destroyer of franchises, and we're
Yep.
seeing that play out in real time. And these franchises are making less money, but it has not stopped them one bit from doing it. Not one bit.
So do you think that with the way modern entertainment is going, that it might be the end of our old franchises, and maybe we might see the rise of some new franchises that might not have made it had those other ones been successful?
That is a tough question. I want that to be.
Because if these franchises do actually fail and fall by the wayside completely, there's going to be a vacuum that has to be filled.
Yes.
And now we could be normal adults who go outside, get sunlight and stuff like that. But if I'm a pasty dude, I'd prefer to watch TV. So, do you think that A, there's no such thing as too big to fail, and B, do these franchises have the capacity to be replaced?
I personally, I think Hollywood needs to fail. The how of that happening, I don't know, because we've already given enough years of YouTubers trying to give solutions to solve these issues, and they're not listening. And the closest thing we ever got to that was the Mandalorian season 2 ending. Because if you think about it, historically speaking, every time a franchise, and this dates back even to pre-woke, every time a franchise pushed a demographic away in some way, they'll try to course correct and they'll gain some fans back, but it'll never be what it once was. Star Wars had the exception to be that when they did that Luke Skywalker ending. Regardless of how you feel, there were people who loved that particular ending. They could have maybe have been the exception, but within a few days later, they chose to not be the exception by having writers of their High Republic such tell off their fans instantly. It's like I was like, hey, you may have gotten this little Christmas gift, but we still hate you anyway. So backhand to you. So man, Hollywood, in my opinion, needs to fall and emerge with something new. Whether it's the Daily Wire doing what they're doing, or something else, or Hollywood 2.0, I don't know. Something does need to change, and how we get there, needs to be. I feel like there needs to be a giant cultural shift, but that shift, in my opinion, is going to take at least a decade or so, and a generation of potential fans may be lost because of that. And that's a big shame, because I have Zers who come up to me, Zers who are 20, 21, and they do ask me for what's good, and because I'll mention this one girl I work with. She's like, "Oh yeah, you know that movie you always talk about, Predator with Schwarzenegger?" I'm like, "Yeah, what about it?" She's like, "Oh, I watched it first time." She's like, "This is an amazing movie. I've never seen something like this." I'm like, "Oh, well, if you like that, check out this flick, that flick, and that flick."
Yeah, for real.
And she was so happy about it. She's like, "I don't see movies like this nowadays." I'm like, it's a big time shift. This is what movies were like then. It got her interested, and I was so happy.
Yeah,
she approached me like, "Nick, what's this about? Where is this in my timeline?" And I feel bad for the younger generation, because you got a lot of people who are fully indoctrinated, but for every bit of them, there are ones who are looking, and they are opening their eyes, and they are seeing absolutely what's going on. I know, because I talk to them, whether it's in the suburbs of Illinois or in the very fine, or not so fine in this case, city of Chicago. They are out there, and they're looking. They want alternatives, especially now since they grew up with technology. They know how to find that entertainment. Look no further than indie movements in movies and music and comic books. The internet has given way. For all its flaws, the internet give us this little shortcut saying, hey, look at all this access you have to find this lesser known thing. And because of the internet, I've been able to find things I probably would have never heard of before. And because of that, I still try to give my money to said product if I enjoy it, just to show hey, listen, I may have discovered because of the internet, the freeway, but I'm still putting my money where my mouth is and directly supporting said product.
Right. So my question is, do you think that YouTube is a viable place for an independent entertainer to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And why? Because it's still the platform that is still the mainstream platform. What I think YouTube has is that advantage of starting off as the definitive mainstream platform. Now, if you can find ways to make your channel grow and big to the point where you got a fan base to call your own, a community to call your own, they can branch off and say, hey, look, guys, I'm going to do some stuff exclusive to like Odysee or stuff exclusive to my website or a separate mailing list. So I feel like what's his name from Young Grippa, he's starting a website and he's actually planning on bowing out of YouTube because he's at around like nearly 400,000 subs. He's like, I'm getting a website going. I want to start a message board, and obviously those things cost money. But obviously, if you got the money and the culture to build it, go for it. It's nice to see a guy like him leading by example and doing that, because the amount of like libertarian or independent or conservative figures leading with political free culture is the number is insignificant. And even Ripa is, when he's making these things, he's not leading with politics, even though he covers a lot of politics on his channel. But as far as like, talking about liberty or just talking about guns or comic books, he wants to keep it politics free because he knows you want to win the culture by winning them just as normal consumers. And then before you know it, the cultural does shift secondary after it, because then the politics are kind of like, it's a seamless transition. When you're already culturally involved in something, the politics are like, oh, hold on, well, I'm already culturally involved in this, so that's how I'm going to vote that way or this way. So, yeah, I feel like the culture is the most important thing, and we got a long game to catch up, but I think with the help of the internet, we do have a chance of speeding that up a little bit, as long as we all apply ourselves.
Right. Yeah. I need to stop fucking around on Blender and actually start releasing some content. I made a chair. Yay.
Hey, you could have made a video of that. I'll build a video of building a chair, man.
Yeah, they already have that on the Blender tutorial. So.
Oh, damn.
But I think this has been a fantastic episode.
Thank you.
I forgot what my topic for next week was going to be.
Man, what's your topic going to be for next week?
Shit.
Guys, he forgot his topic for next week. And I'm the host, and I should know the topic better. That's the tragedy in all this. My guest here, he doesn't know what the topic is for his channel that I'm taking over. He doesn't know, and that's the real tragedy of this all. I should know first. He should know second, but what do we know?
I don't go anywhere unless it's on the struggle bus. That's right. I know. So the question for next time is there a future for physical actors in a digital landscape? But until then, and as always, we hope you have a wonderful day.
Have a better day. Not just wonderful. Better.